Welcome to the Kaur Show. This is episode 16. After all this, we've come to episode 16, which is amazing. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm Ranjit Kaur from the UK, and here with me is my co-host, Gurinder Kaur from Melbourne. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Benji, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you? And what's new with you?
Well, nothing much. It was a pretty relaxing week for me, and I had actually a break on Friday as well. So it's actually a long weekend for me. And with this new timings and today's topic, I'm looking forward.
That's really good. Thank you. This is going to be so good today to learn and hear our guest speakers' viewpoints and experience. So today's topic is about miscarriage and baby loss, which is a huge topic, like I've just mentioned, and that hardly anyone talks about. So our special guest today is Gurinder Mann from the UK, and Gurinder has experienced 6 miscarriages and a stillbirth. And this is just heartbreaking in itself, hearing this, but she's going to be breaking the silence of this subject, especially in our Asian community. And as many as you know, pregnancy and baby loss is such a taboo topic. I'm so glad she's coming on and talking about this because she's a blogger, she's a coach, she's a change maker. And experiencing just 1 miscarriage would be heartbreaking, but 6 and a stillbirth, it's amazing how she's going to come on and talk about her blog as well, which is called A Drug Named Hope. So let's get our guest on and welcome her to the show. Welcome, Gurinder. Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you both?
Yeah, doing really well, thank you. So glad you're here today with us. And if you can tell us and the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Gurinder Mann and I'm from the UK. The introductions are always difficult because I never know where to start. But the reason that I'm on the show today is to talk about my journey to motherhood. My journey to motherhood was pretty complicated, as Benji's just introduced. I didn't expect, pregnancy to be such a difficult journey. I just thought you get married, you try for a family and you have a baby. That's what I saw happening around me. And so when I went through my journey to pregnancy and I lost my first pregnancy to miscarriage, and then I had multiple miscarriages after that, followed by a stillbirth, I just couldn't believe that this was happening to me. It's worth saying my 8th pregnancy did go the distance, and I gave birth to my daughter Simran. So that is how long it took me to get to a living child, and I'm sure we can dig into that a little bit more on the show today.
That's great. Thank you so much for the intro. So do you know what causes a miscarriage? Do you know the background about it after having 1 or 2 of them?
Yeah, so you can I'm not a medical professional, but often they say there can be chromosomal issues which cause miscarriage, and there are a few other causes too, but actually more than 50% of miscarriages happen without a known cause, and that can be really difficult for the person going through it, because sometimes you want a cause because you want some clarity as to what is going on and what can you do to remedy that cause. But often, in most cases, there isn't an identified cause, and it just becomes a really difficult journey because you're kind of wading through the unknown and often looking to medicine to provide some answers, but often those answers aren't there. And that was the case for me. We had lots of tests done. So after you have 3 miscarriages here in the UK, you are entitled to testing to see if there is anything going on inside the body. But I had every test done under the sun, and all of them bar 1 came back clear. There was nothing wrong. The one that came back for me was just that my blood was clotting a little bit more in pregnancy, and the remedy for that was to take baby aspirin to just thin the blood a little bit. But even though I did that in pregnancy 4, 5, 6, 7, I still went on to miscarry. So I don't believe that was the underlying cause for my miscarriages. And I still to this day don't know what was behind them, what was causing them. So, like I say, most miscarriages don't have cause, and it can be really confusing going through that process and not having any answers.
That's so true, Gurinder. And the loss of a baby, regardless of whatever reasons, is very upsetting from someone dreaming and being so excited to have someone new in their life, and just left with the memories of someone you haven't even seen. That's really horrible. Um, Please tell us something like, so when you had your first miscarriage, I'm pretty sure, like every mother, like every family, it would have been very upsetting and stressful situation in your case as well. So how did you manage at that time, and what kind of family support did you have around you?
Um, yeah, my first miscarriage was the most confusing, because I didn't know what was happening to me, because I was
Mm.
pregnant for the first time ever. I didn't know what was normal and what wasn't. And going through pain in pregnancy, part of me just thought maybe this is normal because my body is adjusting. But yeah, it was really confusing, because I felt like I didn't have control over my body. I didn't know what was happening inside my body. And in terms of support, it was really difficult, because I'm quite a private person. I used to be quite a private person, and I didn't want to worry my family and my parents that with what was happening. And I was actually away from home when I had my first miscarriage. I was away with work, and it was my husband actually who said, "Look, let's go to your family home and let's have a little rest there. Your mom and dad can be there." And it was him who helped me to share that news with my family. Um, and it was difficult, because I didn't know how to talk about what was happening to me, because I didn't understand it. And I think my parents, and I have 3 sisters, my 3 sisters were also a little bit like, how do we talk about this? Because we've never experienced this before. We didn't know anybody in our family or friendship circles who experienced a miscarriage. So just having that conversation felt hard on both sides, for me and for them. And yeah, it was just a bizarre time, and I didn't know what support I needed. I didn't. It was a really alien time.
No, I totally understand. And so nice of you to share that as well, because it is difficult when you're trying to explain this to family and you just don't know where to start because it's not happened before or it's not been spoken about. Do you ever like wonder what you could have done differently, or, will this happen again? All these emotions, like, did you ever wonder those type of things?
Um, I think the "could I have done anything differently" question is a really interesting one, because, like I said before, there are often no known causes for a miscarriage. And when we ask that question about what could you have done differently, it always feels like there's an element of blame, that something I did caused that miscarriage. So should I have done something differently? But actually, miscarriage isn't caused by something you've done. It's not caused by something you've eaten. It's not caused by going to the gym. It's not caused by having a hot bath. It's not caused by these things that people out there believe it might be caused by. And so I think it's really important that we shift this question, because there is nothing I could have done in any of my pregnancies. I couldn't have done anything differently to have changed the outcome. because I wasn't causing these miscarriages. And I think that's really important, especially in our community, to just highlight that, because it's so often we hear things culturally. Is it because you ate eggs? Is it because you went on a long drive? Is it because you weren't resting? Is it because you were stressed? And these things that people say to us, they're just not helpful, because none of those things cause miscarriage. But what that question can do is make the other person feel guilty, because an element of blame is being put on that person just through that type of question. So yeah, it's important to highlight that nothing an individual does causes miscarriage. And yeah, we just need to be careful when we ask questions such as that to somebody who's going through the heartache at that time.
That's absolutely right, Gurinder. Yes, and most of the time it's really unknown factors, and there's no reason. Even doctors have a hard time to explain that there's nothing they can explain why this actually failed. So probably that's why people say, okay, the kids or the pregnancy comes with a blessing, and it has to come when it has to come. We have seen so many failed pregnancies and then being blessed with a very healthy child at the time when it was supposed to happen. So it's all about the journey. That's, that as you mentioned as well, that during this time people start blaming you as it was something your fault. That's really hard, and especially when you mentioned that in your case you had 6 miscarriages, which is really a story of courage, like going through all that time period, not only with physically with your body, with all that emotional trauma you might have gone through. So probably if you could tell us what was your strength to regain and go through all this time period and all these stages in your life.
Yeah, you're right. It was really unexpected, because it just kept happening. So every time I'd get pregnant, there was an element of anxiety in that pregnancy, because I didn't know what a healthy pregnancy looked and felt like, because I'd never had one. All I had as a reference point was when things went wrong, because that was my first pregnancy. So every time in a future pregnancy, if I have felt a cramp or a pain, or I had spotting of some sort, there was always this worry: is this going down the same route as the previous pregnancies? So there was this underlying anxiety in my pregnancies from day dot, from as soon as we got the positive pregnancy test. It was, right, we need to just be really careful. But then I would miscarry again. And it was really hard to just keep going through the same outcome. And it's worth saying that with some of my pregnancies, I'd had early scans, and I'd seen, the heartbeat flickering on the scan. We had heartbeat in a number of my pregnancies. And I remember the consultants saying, once you've got a heartbeat, the chances of miscarrying are really low. So, hopefully this should all be fine now. And so that helped me settle a little bit. And I thought, okay, so this pregnancy is going to be different. We've got the heartbeat, we've seen it. But then I still went on to miscarry in those pregnancies, and without a cause. It was just really, really confusing time. And emotionally, what got me through, I think I started to learn to just feel what I was feeling. And if I was feeling angry, I allowed myself to feel angry, because these are real stages in processing something. And losing a pregnancy, having a miscarriage, having a stillbirth, this is grief that you experience, and there are stages to grief. So I started to allow myself to feel what I was feeling, and if I wanted to cry and let it out, I was letting myself feel everything. And I think there was such release in doing so, because I was honoring the feelings that were coming up for me and letting them out of my body, letting them out of my system, and talking to my husband throughout the whole thing, whenever I was feeling down, or if he was feeling down some days, just talking was therapy for us, talking to each other. So that was something that I did. I also, after I had my stillborn daughter, so I gave birth to my daughter Gia in my 7th pregnancy, and Gia was born sleeping. And after we had her, we went for some counselling, because the midwives just thought, you've been through all of this, 6 miscarriages, now giving birth to a sleeping baby, have some therapy if that's helpful. And we took them up on that. We had counselling, and it was helpful. And I encourage people who are struggling to talk to go and see a therapist. But for me and my husband, because we talk a lot, and because we'd been talking throughout all of the miscarriages, I think therapy worked a little bit for us, but we'd done some of the healing ourselves just by being really honest with what we were feeling and experiencing. And yeah, like I said, I just allowed myself to feel all of the complexities of emotions that came. And one thing that is probably worth talking about is my faith. So I had quite a strong faith going into my second pregnancy. But when I miscarried for the second time, my faith took a big hit, because I thought, I can't understand, how is this happening? Why does God keep allowing this to happen to me? I'm a good person, and this doesn't feel good. So I went through a little period where I couldn't do my part. I couldn't pray. I felt this anger. And I kind of turned my back on my faith for a number of months. But when I did that, I felt really lost. I felt like the thing that grounds me and keeps me sane and coping and getting through every single day, that wasn't there anymore, because I turned my back on it. And it was only, after a few months of feeling really lost, that I turned back to my faith, and I started to practice mindfulness. And through mindfulness, I came back to this place of faith, and realizing that, if I was blaming God for these things that had happened to me, I also had to thank God for all of the good stuff that had happened all of my life, because I'd never experienced anything bad, any trauma, anything. I had a really good life, and I had God to thank for that. So I came back to my faith, and I feel that it got stronger, and that helped me to continue after miscarriage 4, 5, 6, 7. My faith was the one thing that was grounding and getting me through, because I just felt that support. I felt the divine support.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that about feelings, faith, and how the support that you've got is being amazing, whether it's with your husband or with your friends or even therapy, because not everyone can talk about issues or don't know where to start with them. So when you go to therapy, maybe they've got a strategy of how you should speak. So I think that's really, really good. You mentioned earlier about testing and how on your 3rd miscarriage, you get tested. Is that at a certain stage? So do you have to be 8 weeks pregnant or 12 weeks, or is it just any pregnancy which has been miscarried, any that count as 3? That's when you get further testing.
Yeah, so you have to have had 3 consecutive miscarriages. So if you miscarry, then you have a living child, then you miscarry again, that doesn't quite qualify you for the testing. It has to be 3 in a row. And that can be a miscarriage at any stage, as long as it's recorded, with your GP or with a medical practitioner. If you've had 3 miscarriages, you're entitled to be referred to have this further testing. And that testing is done prior to getting pregnant again. So it's just on yourself, and even my husband had testing done as well. And it's just to highlight anything that might be going on in your body that could be causing the miscarriage. But like I said, a lot of the time those tests can come back clear as well and not provide the answers that sometimes we really, really want.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gurinder, as you mentioned before as well, that you and your husband actually you went together through this journey, and you used to talk a lot. So besides you and your husband, how was like a kind of a family support, and I'm sure, pretty sure, like as you mentioned earlier as well, that people do have a taste of blaming and coming in the picture and talking through all this. So how did you actually manage that? Did it ever come to your mind? Okay, I'm gonna shut my door. I'm not gonna speak to these people, and maybe I'm gonna retract myself from all these conversations with people around.
Absolutely. So with my family, it was a strange one because I didn't want to keep putting this sadness to them, even to some of my friends. Sometimes if my friends would say, let's meet up, let's do something, part of me was like, well, I feel a bit sad. I don't really want to meet up and put my, hardships and the things I'm going through onto you guys because you want to have a nice social gathering. So I would sometimes make excuses and say, actually, I'm not coming today. And with family, again, I wouldn't share some of the miscarriages. And it was my husband often who was the one telling my parents, this is what's going on. Do you want to come and stay for a few days because, we've got to be in hospital or whatever. So my husband was reaching out to my family quite a bit because I was finding it really difficult. I wanted to shield them and I wanted to protect them from the heartache because it's hard to watch somebody go through miscarriage after miscarriage. And I was always the strong one in the family. And, if I thought if I'm feeling broken, what does that mean for the family? I don't want everybody else to crumble. So I'd put this kind of pressure on myself to just keep it together. I've got my husband for support. We can lean on each other. And I put some barriers up and I didn't always let my family and my sisters in. I'd tell them a couple of times when I'd miscarried, but I didn't tell them the whole story. And that's interesting because now looking back, I wish I have kept the doors open to receive the support when I needed it, rather than feeling like, I've got it together and me and my husband can just soldier through and keep going. Because, it can put strain on a marriage if you two are the only ones leaning on each other for support. Because you need more than that. Because, it's like I said, it can put a strain on a marriage because you're not the counselor, but you're there trying to support each other through the toughest of times. So yeah, I wish I'd have kept the door open and let more people in who I trusted and lent on them when I needed to. And in terms of the community, Benji, what you said is completely right. I did sometimes feel like I don't want to go to certain functions because I knew what people were going to say. People were going to ask me, oh, how long have you been married? Don't you want children? You're going to get too old. Stop putting your career first. Come on, you need to have children. Give your parents grandchildren. All of these things that are often said quite innocently can have a massive impact on the person who is actually behind closed doors going through a really tough time in that space of having a baby. So I would, again, kind of shut myself off sometimes. I'd go to these functions and I would hear all of these things and the other person wouldn't know the impact, but it would stay with me for a while and I would have to go and have a cry. And when I'd get home from that function, I'd feel a bit broken because I'd had all of these comments come to me and these people didn't know what I was going through. So I think it's really important that we start to change the way we speak to people when we see them at family
Yeah.
functions and gatherings. I would much rather somebody ask me how I was feeling. How are you doing? I haven't seen you for a while. Is everything okay? I'd rather
Mm.
that type of, upfront, honest, genuine conversation than the whole, how long have you been married? Why aren't you having children yet? It's not helpful, and it can, like I say, in the background be quite a lot for the person to then pick themselves back up again afterward.
Yeah.
So, in between each pregnancy, did you wait a long time before you would have another trial, or was you advised by the professionals to wait 6 months, or what was best advised to you?
So interestingly, straight after a miscarriage, the consultants actually say, you're most fertile when your next cycle comes. So the advice wasn't to, wait a long amount of time. It was, if you want to try again, you are capable and you are able to. But for me, I think it's really important that I always gave my body time to heal, and more importantly, my emotions time to settle and to be processed, because I didn't want to, lock away the emotions in my body, because I believe they can manifest and come back in some other form or create some other ailment. So I I thought it was really important to give myself time to heal before trying again. And we'd sometimes wait 3-4 months before getting pregnant again. And luckily, getting pregnant wasn't an issue for us. But some people do struggle with that. And when you put together infertility and the pain of trying to get pregnant with miscarriage, that's doubly hard. And I think, that area of infertility is also something that we in our community need to educate ourselves on as well, because there's a lot of heartache involved in that. And I'm learning that from people who I see around me who are going through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Gurinder, did it ever come to your mind, like when there were so many failing pregnancies happening, did it ever come to your mind, okay, maybe no, I'm not going to try anymore, and maybe I should consider adopting something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this answer is twofold, because there was a
Mm.
part of me inside that knew 100% I would be a mum. I knew it, I felt it, I believed it, and I could see it happening. And what I started to come to terms with was, actually being a mum doesn't necessarily mean I have to give birth to my child. I can be a mum through adoption. I can be a mum through surrogacy. I can be a mum through all of these different methods, and I can still be a mum. That the thing that I long to be, I can still be it. And I was quite open to those other avenues. And after I had Gia in my 7th pregnancy, um, a part of me did question whether it was right for me to keep going through pregnancy myself, or whether we should then look at a different option. And I remember immediately after having her, the next day, I remember saying to my husband, I can't do this again. I can't keep putting myself through this. This is breaking my heart. It's breaking me. I can't keep putting myself through it. And he was completely, beside me, and said, that's fine. We don't have to keep doing this. Like, there are other options that we can explore. We can look at adoption, we can look at surrogacy. And thankfully, he was open to all of that. But then maybe a month or so later, when I'd again had time to process my feelings, everything that was coming up for me, I still had that thing inside me saying, I think it's going to be okay. I think you can do it. I think the next pregnancy, it might be okay. Just keep going. And so we did try again, and we did get pregnant again, and we did have our first living daughter, Simran, in that pregnancy. Um, but that's not to say, we didn't consider adoption and surrogacy. I think they are really valid avenues to try if you are struggling to get pregnant or to stay pregnant. So yeah, we definitely did consider them both.
I think it's really nice how you've mentioned about hope, grabbing onto hope every time. And sometimes it does maybe take that a little bit longer to grab that after you've had a mishap or a miscarriage. And then you get that, you got the courage to start all over again because you're back to square one, but you've got a different mindset. So I think that's really nice. Another question I wanted to ask you was, although not every woman has a miscarriage will need a grief counsellor, and not everyone grieves will develop a clinical depression. So at what stage would you recommend seeing a counsellor after a tragedy? Like, what are your thoughts in this after all your experience?
I think there is absolutely no shame in therapy and counselling and alternative forms of, healing and talking. I encourage people, if you are struggling to speak about something that's happened, not just in the world of baby loss, but anything else that you might be feeling or going through that feels difficult, if there aren't people around you that you trust or you can fully open up to, I recommend seeing a counsellor, at any point. You don't have to wait until you've been through something so many times. Reach out at the time you need it. If you're struggling to process or come to terms with something, reach out to a professional, because we have to remember that we aren't taught by our parents and our grandparents how to do some of this stuff, how to heal from the inside, how to talk about our feelings. Because often we're told, oh, don't cry, or, oh, don't be angry. But that's not healing. There's no therapy, there's no release in that. Whereas if you go to counselling, you are allowed to feel everything, whatever is coming, whatever you want to talk about, let it come, because there's release in that. And so I say, if there isn't anybody around you who you can have that outlet with, reach out to a counsellor at any point of any process that you're going through, because there's just so much benefit in it. Don't hold on to these things privately and leave them locked inside you. Go and talk, and break your own silence. It's so freeing to be able to talk about a truth of something that is happening for you. So yeah, I say don't wait until something's happened a number of times. Go and seek somebody to support, an outside, if it's an outside professional, just do it.
So
recently, sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
That's okay, Benji. You can go. I just had a little bit of connection problem here.
That's okay. So recently I was contacted by a staff member from the Birmingham Women's Hospital, which is an award-winning hospital, and they're very well known. And they currently have services available for like bereavement and baby loss. And they're thinking about having a building just for women with complications and baby loss for further, if they need it. And I didn't know, but the facts were that 8,000 babies are delivered there alone in that one hospital, and 2,000 of those 8,000 babies don't make it. So whether it's stillborn, complications, or miscarriage. So currently Birmingham Women's Hospital are fundraising for Woodlands House, where families can spend time with their stillborn babies, like a private area where women can grieve, talk, and breathe. And I think this is absolutely amazing. And Gurinder, what do you think about this? Like, although every hospital is very different, but the way they explained how those women, after they've given birth to a stillborn or even a very small fetus, they have to still go to the maternity ward and be with women that have had normal babies. And the heartbreak of those women, I can't comprehend how they feel. But like, do you ever think that should have been, or was that available for you?
So in some, maybe in most, in some hospitals, let's say, there is a bereavement suite, so a bereavement room, but that's usually in the maternity unit. So when I had Gia, I was wheeled straight into this bereavement room, but I could still hear the women around me in the other wards giving birth. I could still hear in the night, the babies crying. And it was hard. It was hard because my room was quiet. My baby was in her cuddle cot and she wasn't crying. And it's hard to be in that space. So, and even going for appointments, if you have some bleeding in pregnancy or a complication, you still have to go to the maternity section, or you have to walk through the maternity section and sit in a waiting room where all of these happily pregnant mums are there, but you are petrified because you're going through something, you're having a bleed, you're in pain, you've got something happening that these women aren't going through. And it's really hard to sit and be in that space. And I actually welcome what the Women's Hospital are doing to create a slightly separate wing or a slightly separate unit or building where if you are having some complications in pregnancy, you can go through a different door. You don't have to be faced with everything to do with pregnancy and, adverts on the screens about which cot to buy and all of this stuff, because it's really hard to consume all of that when your emotions are all over the place, when you're feeling confused. So yeah, I welcome there being a slightly separate unit for people who are going through complications in pregnancy and then go on to deliver their baby. And if that baby is born sleeping, I think it's nice that you're in a slightly separate space. That's my view. Other people I know might say, actually, it's nice to have company. It's nice to hear other babies because it might, I don't know, lift your spirit or something. But my view is I would have liked for it to be slightly separate. And I know a few hospitals that are trying to do something similar. My local hospital eventually would like to do this as well. So I welcome it. I think it's a good thing that the Women's Hospital are planning to do.
Absolutely. And I think everyone has their own way of, feeling that, going through that feeling of grief. And some people want to be just lonely, not to talk to someone, whether some people feel a bit of relaxed when they have their family around. So Gurinder, after all these miscarriages and still pregnancy, so after all that period of grief, you actually had a healthy pregnancy. So tell us about something about that. How did you feel, and what was that kind of emotions at that time? If you could share that.
Yeah, absolutely. So something after I had Gia, I felt like I was so ready to talk about all of this stuff. I thought, I'm not going to keep my baby a secret. She was born. She may not have been born alive, but I want to say her name. I want to, on her birthdays, release a balloon for her. I want to acknowledge her in my family because she is a part of my family. And in order for me to honor her existence, I had to talk about it. And that's when I started my blog, A Drug Named Hope. And I can't tell you how freeing it felt to just put out into the world, this is my story. This is what's happened. I've had 6 miscarriages. I've given birth to a sleeping daughter. And this is it. There was so much acceptance that came with that and so much release. And like I said before, just freeing. I lifted a weight off my shoulders. I wasn't carrying this stuff silently on my own. I just put it out there, and something in releasing it had an impact on me inside. And so when I embarked on my 8th pregnancy, I felt different. I really felt different. And I did a few other things. I'd had the counselling, as I mentioned. I'd done some Chinese acupuncture. I'd done some dietary changes. I was managing my stress. I actually left work. So I had done a lot outside of that pregnancy to just put myself in a space where I could just open myself up to another pregnancy. And all of that, I think, played a part, because for the first time in the 8th pregnancy, for the first time, I kind of embraced being pregnant. I was no longer in denial or, shielding myself from the emotions of pregnancy. I was allowing myself to feel pregnant. I was talking to my bump. I was touching my bump. I was sending it love. I was praying. I was doing everything to keep myself in a really good space. And so I did feel a bit of anxiety in that pregnancy, but not as much as you might expect, considering what happened in my 7th pregnancy. And I feel like I learned to surrender. I learned to just give this over to God. And I wouldn't pray every day and say, Maharaj, please give me this baby. I would say, you do what is right. Whatever happens, I trust that it is the right thing. And that's where I was with my faith. And I felt in doing that, I literally took the pressure off my shoulders and said, over to you, you do what is right. And I again released myself from some of this stress and pressure. And, I had lots of medical checkups. I was under really good care. Every 2 weeks, I was being scanned, and I had progesterone and some other things as well in that pregnancy. And yeah, I got to the end of it, and I had a cesarean section to bring Simran into the world.
That's wonderful. It's so nice to hear that faith and just letting it be the way it should be is, the way forward. I think that's really nice. At the moment on Instagram and your stories, you've conducted like a series for people to share their experience or feelings or how how the process went for them. And what made you want to do this? I've been following them. They're very nice. Thank you so much for sharing these. What made you want to do this type of series on Instagram?
So when I started my blog, I was inundated with people saying, this has happened to me too. I've never told anyone, or I was told to keep it a secret, or I was told it was my fault. I was hearing all of these stories, and it was breaking my heart every single time I would get one, because often the person was suffering quietly and holding on to this pain silently. And I thought, this isn't helpful, because they're still in the depths of that grief, because they haven't been allowed to express it. And I didn't know at the time that I would want to, turn my platform into something where other people could share, but it's just kind of happened this year. So it's Baby Loss Awareness Week at the moment. And I thought, rather than me sharing more of my story, let me give my platform, let me give other people a space on my platform to share their experiences, share their stories, and to show us that every instance of miscarriage and baby loss, it's different. We don't all just sit in the same category and we're all in this box. We've all had the same thing happen to us, because often our experiences are worlds apart. And that's what the series on Instagram at the moment is designed to show, that every experience of baby loss is different. We have miscarriage, we have multiple miscarriages, we have ectopic pregnancies. That's not covered in this series, but just as an example, that is baby loss too. We have a baby born before 24 weeks that is born alive and heart beating, but medically they don't do anything to support that baby because it's before 24 weeks. We have stories of stillbirth. We have a baby born alive at full term who's then gone on to pass away due to negligence. So there are so many different stories of baby loss. And we also in this series will cover infertility and just hear the voice of that person too, because they are experiencing some form of loss. They want a child and they are, on a really tough road to get there. So I wanted to share that voice too. And all the people are from the South Asian community. And I just want us all to, club together, hear each other's stories, and expand our view on what baby loss is, and learn to see the person in front of us who is sharing their story. That's all we need to do. We don't need to, go off into our mind and compare their story to somebody else's, or feel like we have to fix it or anything like that. Just see and hear the person who is sharing their story. And that is the whole premise behind opening up my platform for others to share their story this week. It's really important.
Yeah.
I remember, I'm sorry, Gurinder, you're here.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, when we're talking about, sharing the stories. So in Australia, and I'm not sure about UK, what date it is, but we do have October 15th as the International Pregnancy and Infant Loss Day. So that's the day when the bereaved parents from Australia and around the world, they pause to remember their babies who are missed by them. And I think it's a significant day for those parents, and honoring the approximately 106,000 babies who have lost their lives to miscarriage, stillbirth, and newborn death each year. So that's a huge number. And there are definitely a number of activities that happen around the world to remember those. And of course, we need networking to support all those parents who have gone through this journey. So, Gurinder, maybe you can tell us about something that's happening around this time in the month of October. Do you organize anything special this month? And do you have you built a support network where parents who have gone through a journey like yours, they're networking with each other and supporting as well?
So as I said, this week is actually Baby Loss Awareness Week, and it will culminate on the 15th of October with this ceremony. It's called Wave of Light, and at 7 o'clock on the 15th of October, everybody who has experienced miscarriage, baby loss of any sort is invited to light their candle and share that picture in a ceremony. It'll be online this year, but often there are lots of in-person activities that happen if COVID wasn't around. So churches and different groups have ceremonies where families can come together. I've been to ceremonies in the past where we light a candle in a lantern and put it on the river, and it floats away in this songs, and it's just a beautiful way for people to connect to one another. There are lots of things going on, and I encourage people to get involved, because even if you haven't experienced loss yourself, if you know somebody who has, I would encourage you to, at 7 o'clock on the 15th of October, light a candle for the baby that was lost by a friend or family member. Send it to them. Show them that you are standing beside them and you are supporting them as they go through, their process of living life without their longed for baby. So everybody can get involved, and I encourage everyone to, because it's an opportunity to just show our support and show that we're all here to try and learn and educate ourselves on this topic, so that people don't suffer silently.
That's great. Thank you so much. There's also other organisations in the UK as well, which is like sans.org.uk and tommys.org. So do you have any feedback from any of your networking from social media that women, how they've been affected during COVID? Like, obviously the services aren't there and you can go into someone and talk to them. So do you think it's made an impact on them as well in a worse way, or what's your thoughts on this?
I think it's been really, really difficult, because I've spoken to many women who have, felt like their pregnancy isn't going right, and they're attending appointments in hospital alone. And, if you are told that news when you're having a scan that, there is no heartbeat, you are miscarrying or you have miscarried, imagine receiving that information on your own. It's really hard. And some women have reached out to me to tell me this, and that they've found it really difficult, because something happens when you're delivered news that to a bystander is really clear. They might completely hear the words, but when you are feeling so emotional and you wish for this pregnancy to be okay, sometimes you don't hear the words that are being told to you. So, you still have an element of denial, or, this is going to be okay. So it's often really needed when you have somebody next to you, because they can help you to slowly process the words that have been told to you. But if nobody is there, often, you haven't heard fully what the consultant has said, because you go off into this place of what's happened, what is going on, and it can be really, really confusing, and clearly emotional. So yeah, I have had people reach out and just say they've struggled this whole period of COVID, because they weren't there. They didn't have anybody there when they received this devastating news about their pregnancy. And it can often create a bit of a disconnect between partners, I've been told, because usually your partner is there by your side, but they weren't there when you were delivered the most devastating news. And it can be hard to relay that to a partner. So for all number of reasons, I think it's been a really extra tough time for those experiencing miscarriage and stillbirth at the time of COVID.
Yeah. I've actually very unfortunately met with some families who have where they haven't been able to, give birth to or become parents, and the families have actually broken. And yes, that's how the relationships have just ruined. And that's very devastating, because it's like a double torture for someone who is going through this emotional journey and still losing another relation because of something that is not their fault. But yes, that's everyone has a different journey. That's what we can say. Yes, we almost towards the end of the show, and probably Ranjit, Panji, do you have any more questions before we finish this?
Oh, I have lots of questions, but we've only got 5 minutes.
Yes.
So I think it's really good how, Gurinder, you've come out and you've explained your story so well on social media. And that's how I picked you up, because I was just like, wow, this is so amazing for you to do this, and you look so courageous. And even though there might be emotions like, why did this happen, and is this my fault, or guilt or shame, will I miscarry again, should I find out what happened to me, or what will the community say? And at the end of it, I like what you said at the beginning, which was, it's not our fault, it's not my fault. So I think that's a really good message, that the blame should be shifted off from you, because it was kind of meant to be that way. But then no one wants to hear these words. Just a support or someone listening in itself is enough. Someone being there to hear you and your story is enough. So I like how you've got a platform where people can perhaps even come to you and talk to you about just their experience, because you're someone that relates to them. And I think that's amazing. So will you be doing more, or will you be doing comments on your social media about people's experiences or stories?
I've had even more messages come to me in the last couple of days with the series that we're doing on Instagram at the moment, Diversity in Loss. lots of people wanting to share their stories. So I'm sure I will change maybe the focus of the blog and do more of that to share other people's stories. I just need to think about the direction it goes in, but I will keep putting out things to help educate us and how to change the nature of the conversation around baby loss, because as you just summed up, Benji, it's often, I think it can be quite simple in terms of advice to, the wider world who aren't going through this. Often the other person who is struggling and doesn't know how to deal with this grief and this tragic news that has happened, what they don't need and what they don't want is somebody telling them, oh, you should have done this, here's some advice and do this next time, or everything happens for a reason, just get over it now, just carry on. This stuff we don't need to hear. All we need is for the other person, whether they've been through it or not, is to just sit with us, to just be there for us, and to just let us release our story and tell them how we are feeling. That's all we need. So we just need to become better listeners and just be more compassionate. That would be my overarching message to anybody listening to this who wants to support somebody going through a tough time. Just be there, be next to them, extend a hand, listen. If you don't know what to say, that's totally fine. If you're scared you're going to say the wrong thing, that's okay. Just sit with them and listen. You can't go wrong there. And be present in that conversation, because you will pick up on what that person is saying and what they need. You can even ask them, what do you need from me? And that's the change I want to happen. And that applies across all tough topics, not just baby loss. Let's just be more compassionate. Let's hear the other person and make room for them.
I think that was absolutely gold. What you said, Gurinder, yes, we need to be more compassionate. That's the key. And that's not just with baby loss, that's across everything. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time today. Yes.
Thank you for having me, being brave enough to talk about this conversation, because this is what we need. We need more of these conversations.
No, I also think, like, how you've got a platform where people that maybe don't have support, now they do. Now they can go somewhere, even if it's just a private message. So, thank you so much for today and your amazing bravery and sharing your knowledge and experience. Yes, you may not be a professional, but you know much more than, than the average person. So we hope at least one individual who may be even experiencing this type of issue, especially in our Sikh community, if there is anyone that you would, that wants to discuss this further or share your story in confidence, then you can see how approachable Gurinder is. Please get in touch with her. Gurinder, where can people find you? On Instagram, it's a drug named Hope. And so where else on your platforms?
So I'm on Facebook as well, also at A Drug Named Hope, and I've got a blog in itself, and that's just adrugnamedohope.com. So you will find me, just search A Drug Named Hope.
Oh, yes. No, this is amazing. Thank you so, so much. And for all those who are viewing the show, thank you for tuning in. And if you've got any comments or a specific topic that you would like us to share, then please send us an email to hello@thecourshow.com. Also, if you want to see any of our previous shows, then please look at our website, thecourshow.com. Thank you, Gurinder, and thank you, Gurinder Benji. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.